actually would have sworn that I had seen every kind of murder you could imagine. Name a location, a victim, a motive, a suspect, a weapon. I've covered 10 of them. But never a woman killed on a conjugal visit to a husband. A husband who's serving 4 life sentences for murder. That one is a first, for me, anyway. Still, if any inmate would strangle a loving and trusting and clearly devoted spouse, David Brinson is a pretty likely candidate. Back in 1990, Brinson stormed into a Los Angeles apartment aiming to rob a retired tavern owner who he thought was a drug dealer. But alas, there were no drugs. There were no big wads of cash, just 4 men sitting there watching a basketball game. So David Brinson made a plan. He forced all 4 of those men to the floor and he shot them one by one in the backs of their heads, also known as execution style. David Brinson was convicted of that, and he was sentenced to 4 consecutive life terms with no possibility of parole. And at some point, while David Brinson was marking off those long days at the Mule Creek State Prison in California, he connected with Stephanie Dowles on the outside. Stephanie was known to her family as Stevie, and she was a successful salon owner, a mother of 2, and a grandmother of 6. Stevie believed that she was helping inmate Brinson find redemption, thereby making him a better man, and soon she married him. Not long after that, the state of California allowed her to be alone with him during something commonly known as the conjugal visit. Nowadays, there are only 4 states that allow conjugal visits. Bet you didn't know that. California is one of them. Inmates with good behavior can earn what are called family visits that take place in apartment-like facilities on the prison grounds. And those visits can last up to 40 hours. That also surprised me. Stevie and David, they were on a conjugal visit last November 13th when David picked up the phone and told the officers that his wife had passed out. The paramedics tried to revive her, but less than an hour later, Stevie was dead. For the next 4 months, her family was led to believe that Stevie died of natural causes. But then the coroner determined something else. Coroner determined that Stevie was strangled, apparently by the man she married and conjugally visited at the prison. While Stevie's last visit on November 13th seemed to be the final chapter for her, we are now learning some new details. David Brinson had apparently engaged in several conjugal visits with Stevie, including one in which her 3-year-old grandson was present. Let that sink in for a hot minute. He's a multiple murderer with a wife and grandson on the premises. We've also learned that Brinson attempted to take his own life back in July and failed, and yet was still allowed his visits with Stevie afterwards. As of yet, no charges, additional, I should say, have been filed against Brinson. DA says he's still waiting for a full report from the prison. But Stevie's family is heartbroken. They want justice, not to mention answers. They want answers. Why are murderers with multiple victims being allowed these family visits? Why did it take 4 months to classify Stevie's death as a homicide? And how many more times will prison officials let this kind of thing happen? Because I hope you have a drink, because this story is about to take a turn sideways. Stevie was not the only woman killed on a conjugal visit at the Mule Creek State Prison. Also last year, on July 1st, Tania Thomas was allegedly killed by her domestic partner during her visit to the prison. A partner of hers, Anthony Curry, is a convicted carjacker and attempted murderer, and his case just went to the DA in December. I'm joined now by Stevie Dell's daughter, Nataly Jimenez. Nataly, thank you so much for being with me, and I'm so sorry for what you and your family are going through, especially just how complicated it seems and the lack of answers. How did you first find out about this, and where do things stand today?
We found out Wednesday morning, November 13th. We got the phone call that she was found passed out and they weren't able to resuscitate her. About 2 weeks
Did
later,
they say anything more about it?
No.
Before we go further, did they say anything about being passed out? Did they say she'd hit her head, or that she appeared to have a seizure, or anything else that was informative other than just passed out?
No. No. When David called, he called me. He said when he woke up to go to the restroom, he found her passed out. When he went to the restroom and came back, he found her passed out. But it's like, how did you not see her passed out before you went to the restroom? I also um I also asked, what time did she go to sleep? He gave me about 3 different times. Every time I asked him to repeat the story to me, he probably changed it about 4 to 5 times.
So
So,
what happened? Like, why did it take 4 months for them to finally come up with strangulation? I mean, 4 months seems an awfully long time to come up with something other than passed out, something as serious as strangulation. And 4 months seems a long time to let you and your family know that.
it is. It is. 4 months. I honestly think they were trying to sweep it under. It was a little short after. We had help from a forensic person, and when he seen the body, he said there was evidence of abuse, so to do a private autopsy. So I really do think the prison was trying to go around it, and they found out that we were doing a private autopsy, and they just decided to tell us. But 4 months is still a lot. I think they knew sooner, and they could have told us sooner. I honestly feel like they were just trying to find a way to go around it.
What did you know about David Brinson? And were you ever concerned about Stevie going inside the prison walls to spend time alone with him in an enclosed space that's unmonitored?
I mean, speaking to him, it was, you wouldn't think too much of it. It seemed like he was trying to get better. He was in school. He knew I was doing treatments. I was doing chemo treatments and things like that. So he would call me, and he would do like prayers before me going to my treatments. And, you know, um, he would engage a lot, well, try to engage a lot. A lot of the family wasn't a big fan of him just because he was in prison. Nobody really knew what he was in prison for. So,
And
just everything
what do
coming
you,
out,
yeah, I was going to say,
everything
what do you
coming
make of the fact that July 1st, this had happened to Tania Thomas? She was allegedly killed by her domestic partner. It's two of these in 1 year. What are your thoughts about that?
No, I feel like they should have stopped conjugal visit when it happened to Tanya. They should have definitely stopped it. And even with David trying to commit suicide, he shouldn't have no type of visitation after that attempt.
Are you and your family planning to sue the prison based on the fact that there'd been a death like this in July, and that, you know, your mom was murdered in November?
Yes, definitely. We do want justice for my mom. Um, you know, Definitely for CDRC to change their policies and be more involved with the civilians instead of the inmates. Just like inmates have to check in 4 times out of the night, they should at least check on civilians 2 to 3 times a day or in the night, whatever the case is. But yes, we do plan on going after the prison after CDRC.
Did Nataly ever tell you and the family about these visits and the security? Was there a panic button? Was there some means of communication for an outsider being brought into the inside to spend upwards of 40 hours fairly unmonitored? What kind of security systems were in place? Did she ever describe it?
No, no security really in place. I mean, when she gets there, they take away all her personal belongings, meaning like her purse, her wallet, her cell phone. So she really just goes in there with the clothes that she brought. So you just go in there, and the only one that does the check-in is the inmate. They do a check-in 4 times out of the night just to make sure they're in the room.
But there's nothing for the visitor who may be in a dangerous situation to communicate to guards, I need help inside this room or in this apartment.
No, just the phone. Just the phone where the inmates have to check in. But
And
either
I have to
they
ask
should
you this,
definitely have.
Nataly, sorry to interrupt, did your mom ever say that there were any red flags at all? I mean, she brought this 3-year-old, right? I think it was a 3-year-old on one of the visits. Did she ever feel there was any risk at all of having these visits?
Yeah, that was actually my son she would take. No. And it just makes you think, like, what if he was in that visit with her this time? You know, maybe he would have hurt my son as well. It just makes you think all kinds of things, but no red flags. The 2 visits that they went on, she said, and he also said that he was grateful to, have spent time with my son. And, that was kind of a connection for him of the outside world. And he was really happy when he spent those 3-4 days with my son.
Well, I am so relieved to hear that, your son is okay and that it was on a different visit. But my God, I am so sorry, Nataly, that you've lost your mom in this way. Please keep us informed about what happens next in your process. Thank you for being here tonight.
Thank you.
So many questions about that case, about the other case, about conjugal visits in general. I'm joined now by Lenard Vare. He is the former director of the Napa County Jail System and a former prison warden with 28 years of inmate management experience. He's also the author of Elephant Keepers, Reflections of a Prison Warden. Thank you, Lenard, for being here. I wanted to get your reaction to the fact pattern that I just laid out in the interview I just conducted. Tell me your thoughts about this.
So thanks for having me. And yeah, it's a real troubling situation at this facility. It's highly irregular that they have conjugal visits. It's not very common. I think I heard you say that he was suicidal. That should have been a big red flag. And just that alone, they should have not allowed him to have those kinds of visits.
I keep coming back to the images that we see when we journalists go in to interview inmates. They're handcuffed and they are frequently shackled at the ankles. And that is policy. That isn't because they particularly fear that person at that moment. It is just policy. And then I think about how much freedom an inmate like this has with a family member, a grandchild even, for 40 hours straight. And this isn't computing for me. How did anybody come to the determination that this kind of one-on-one interaction would be safe when normally everyone's shackled if he or she's an inmate?
Well, I think it's a policy issue, and this is a policy that they've had in the state prison system where they allow these types of visits. It's been something that in California that's been historically done. The issue that I have is just what you said. The highest risk individuals are the people that are there for murder. In this case, this gentleman was in prison for committing 4 murders. He was in there on a sentence which would have kept him behind bars for the rest of his life. He did not have a possibility of ever getting released. That makes him one of the most dangerous, highest risk individuals. You would keep that person, if you had a doctor's visit or a psychiatrist visit, you would keep that person in chains, you would have him shackled, etc. But then to take that same person and then put him in a situation like this, where he's around a minor child, and he's around a civilian, and there's no cameras in those areas because it's considered an intimate family visit. I don't know if there's a panic button or an intercom where somebody could have called for assistance. Just the fact that his background is so severe, he's there after killing 4 people and serving a life sentence without the possibility of any, possibility of release. It is mind-boggling that they would think that it was safe for him to have that kind of a visit.
Lenard, can I ask you this? Clearly someone came up with these policies long ago because there had to be some benefit to them. In your experience, is there a benefit to conjugal visits? Because only 4 states allow them now, and now we've seen, 2 horrifying deaths in just 1 year.
Well, I can tell you that the California prison system is generally one of the more violent prisons or prison systems in the country. There's always, murders, and if you just look at this particular facility, just in the last 2 years, there's been attempted murders on corrections officers. There's been murders against other inmates. This is a facility where there is a lot of violence. Now, you consider that kind of an environment, that's what these people are dealing with daily. And then you take one of those people and put him in this kind of a situation, you are not looking for good outcomes. It's a prayer and wishful thinking that I believe they've been able to keep these kinds of incidents to a low degree. But now, as you said, there was one that occurred just a few months before this incident, which should have been a big red flag. Right there, prison policy should have immediately been to stop all future visits until they could figure out what went wrong. There should have been an investigation. Outside investigators should have been brought in. There's a lot of things that prisons do, and generally, I work in about 30 different states doing consulting work for jails and prisons. And I find that corrections facilities and agencies are generally very risk averse. They're not the ones that say, hey, let's try out all kinds of new novel ideas and increase liability. This is silly to, once they know that somebody actually was killed, and then to place another person in that same situation.
I have a feeling this might be the very last of the conjugal visits at Mule Creek State Prison, and maybe other states will take a look. I have to leave it there, but I'm so thankful for your expertise. Lenard Vare, thank you so much for this.
Thank you.
Hey, thanks for watching. Go to joinnn.com to find NewsNation on your screen. And don't forget, click the red subscribe button below to get more of NewsNation's fact-driven, unbiased coverage.